Today, we're doing something, well, a little different.
A lot different, I'd say.
Yeah. Usually when we talk about books, especially ancient ones, we're talking about literary analysis.
Yeah.
We get into metaphor, history, translation
Not the
issues.
traditional way of reading.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But today, we're looking at a stack of sources that claim the most famous book in history isn't just a book at all. They claim it's a database.
It's a really profound shift in perspective.
Hmm.
We're looking at materials all surrounding the Torah code, which some people also call the Bible code.
Right.
And to really understand the sources we have in front of us today, and they range from software manuals to deep theological research by figures like Cardinal Richard Ruff and the mathematician Elihu Rips, you have to sort of suspend the idea of reading in the way we normally think about it.
We're talking about decryption.
We're talking about decryption.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this isn't about finding a hidden meaning behind a parable or something.
Wow!
We're talking about a literal mathematical encryption that has supposedly been locked away for, 3,300 years?
That's the claim. And the central hook, the thing that sort of kicks this whole idea off, is a prophecy found in the book of Daniel.
Daniel 12.4. It's got it right here. I really want to read this because it sets the stage for the entire argument. It says, "But you, Daniel, keep these words secret and seal up the book until the time of the end. Many will rush here and there as knowledge increases."
Knowledge shall be increased. That is the key phrase. That's what the entire source material hinges on.
Okay, but what does that mean? People have always been gaining knowledge.
Right, but the argument isn't that people became, smarter or more spiritual. It's that we developed a very specific kind of knowledge.
Technological knowledge.
Technological knowledge, exactly.
Yeah.
The sources argue that the sealing of the book was a physical reality. The information was encoded in a way that made it literally impossible to access until we invented the computer.
So it's like a time capsule.
It's the ultimate time capsule.
With a lock that only opens when a civilization hits a certain tech level.
Yeah.
I mean, specifically, the processing power to handle just massive data sets.
Precisely. And if you look at the history of this, people have suspected something was hidden for centuries. Sir Isaac Newton was obsessed with it.
Right, I read that. He was looking for a code.
He was, but he was doing it by hand. Counting letters with a quill and ink, it was impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we're looking at algorithms that can process millions, even billions of permutations in a second.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack this Torah code. We need to understand the mechanism. How does this thing called equidistant letter sequencing, or ELS, actually work?
Yeah, the nuts and bolts.
Then we've got to look at the credibility. Is this just, people finding patterns in clouds, or is there real math behind it?
The statistical argument.
Right. And importantly, we're going to look at the specific and frankly really controversial findings these researchers claim to have unlocked. And that includes everything from modern events to the identity of the Messiah.
And we should be very clear here for everyone listening. The sources we're discussing, they make incredibly bold claims. They aren't suggesting vague similarities.
Yeah.
They're claiming to have found specific names, dates, and locations encoded in a text that predates them by thousands of years.
So let's start with that mechanism. How does it work? If I open a Torah, I see Hebrew text. It's a narrative. It's Moses, the commandments, wandering in the desert. How do we get from that story to a computer code?
You have to fundamentally change how you view the document. It stops being a book and it becomes a string of data.
What do you mean?
Well, normally you read words, and those words are separated by spaces.
Right.
Punctuation.
Mm.
The theory behind the Torah code, behind ELS, treats the text as one continuous, unbroken string. Imagine you take the entire Torah, specifically the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis through Deuteronomy, and you just hit delete on all the spaces.
All of them.
All of them. All the punctuation. Everything.
Right.
You're left with one massive, unbroken string of 304,805 Hebrew letters.
That is an incredibly specific number, 304,805.
And it has to be that specific. This is a crucial point for the code's validity. If you add one letter or you take away one letter, anywhere in that entire text,
The whole thing shifts.
the whole thing breaks.
Yeah.
The code is gone. It's garbage. And this is where the concept of the Masoretic text becomes absolutely vital.
I saw that term in the notes. Yeah, what is that exactly?
It's essentially the master file of the Hebrew Bible. It was maintained by a group of scholars called the Masoretes, mostly between the 7th and 10th centuries. But their tradition goes back much, much further.
And they were. Meticulous, I take it.
Meticulous is an understatement. They were obsessive. They didn't just copy the words, they counted the letters. They counted the verses. They knew exactly which letter was the precise middle of the entire Torah.
Wow.
The argument in our sources is that this obsession wasn't just, religious devotion. It was a preservation mechanism.
To preserve the integrity of the code.
Exactly. Without that precise character count, the algorithms we're about to talk about would just spit out noise.
Okay, so we had this giant solid block of data. You said it's like a strand of DNA. How does a computer even begin to read it?
It uses what's called a skip code. The computer doesn't read the letters right next to each other like we do. It looks for patterns based on a fixed interval or a skip.
Give me an example.
Okay, so it might take the first letter of Genesis, then skip forward, say, 50 letters and grab that one, then skip another 50 letters, grab the next, then another 50.
And it strings those letters together to see if they make a word.
Exactly.
And it does this for every possible number, not just 50.
For every possible number. It checks a skip of 2, a skip of 3, a skip of 4, all the way up to skips of thousands and thousands. And this is the part that critics often miss, and it's so important, just finding a single word isn't the code.
Right.
I mean, if you take a book as long as Moby Dick and you look for the word whale, using enough skip combinations, you're going to find it. That's just probability.
That's the Texas sharpshooter fallacy, right? You shoot the side of a barn and then draw a target around the bullet hole.
That's a perfect analogy, exactly. But the Torah code's claim to fame, its distinction, is what they call the matrix or the grid.
The grid. Okay.
When the software finds a key search term, let's use an example from the sources, moon landing. It doesn't just say, hey, I found it. It reformats the entire 304,805 letter text into a grid.
How does it decide the size of the grid?
The width of the row is determined by the skip number. So if the term moon landing appeared with a skip of, say, 5,000 letters, the computer creates a grid that is 5,000 letters wide. And what that does is it stacks the letters of your search term perfectly on top of each other in a vertical column.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm visualizing that. So it's like a self-generating crossword puzzle based on the math of the word you're looking for.
That is a perfect way to put it, a self-generating crossword. And once that grid is formed, the computer then analyzes the letters immediately surrounding your keyword, vertically, horizontally, diagonally. This is the matrix.
And this is where the magic is supposed to happen.
This is it. The claim is that in the Torah, unlike in War and Peace or Moby Dick or any other text, you find these statistically significant clusters of related information. So right next to moon landing, you don't find gibberish. You find Apollo. You find spaceship. You find the date, July 20th, 1969.
All in the same little area of the grid.
All clustered together. So the code isn't just one word, it's the context. It's the whole cluster of related facts appearing in a space where statistically they just shouldn't exist.
Okay, but there's a huge catch here, isn't there? A limitation that actually explains why this stayed hidden for so long, even after we had computers.
There is, and it's that the computer is only as smart as the dictionary you give it.
This is the Scrabble analogy. I read this in the source material, and it really clicked for me. It makes so much sense.
It's the best way to understand the user's role in all of this. So imagine you're playing Scrabble on your computer. You've got the letters on your rack to spell the word selfie.
Right.
You put them down on the board. But what happens if your computer is running a dictionary from, say, 1990?
It rejects it. The little red line appears. It says selfie. Is it a word?
Exactly. The letters are there. The reality of the word exists. But the system doesn't recognize it because that term hasn't been defined in its database yet.
And the Torah code works the same way.
Precisely. The grid is just sitting there, full of millions of possible letter combinations. But if you're looking for a modern name, let's say Elon Musk or Barack Obama, you have to manually input that name into the software's search dictionary. You have to tell it what to look for.
So you can't just hit a button that says, tell me the future.
Yo.
You have to ask us specific questions. You have to already know the name you're looking for to see if it's there.
You have to know the name. The code is interactive. The source material talks about specific software like the Bible Code app and Keys to the Bible. These programs have bilingual dictionaries. You can input modern Hebrew terms, names of politicians, technological concepts.
And that circles right back to Daniel.
It does. Knowledge shall be increased. The argument is that the code is waiting for us to learn the words. We had to live through the moon landing and know the word Apollo before we could go back and verify its existence in the code.
That's a fascinating concept. The idea that the information is there, but it's completely invisible until we live through the event that gives us the search term.
Right.
But let's play skeptic for a minute. Is this real? Because I can see people, myself included, thinking this is just creative data mining. But the sources, they claim this has been validated by serious people. We're talking mathematicians, not just theologians.
And that's where the story moves from, an interesting theory to something much more compelling. This isn't just a modern internet thing. As we mentioned, Sir Isaac Newton was obsessed with this. He wrote more about theology and alchemy than he did about physics.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. He learned Hebrew specifically to find this code, but he failed.
Because he was doing it by hand. He didn't have the processing power.
He couldn't do it. Then you fast forward to the mid-20th century. You have a rabbi named Michael Burweis Mendel finding some skip patterns manually. Just incredible work. But the breakthrough, the moment this entered the realm of hard science, was in the 1980s with Professor Eliyahu Rips.
Rips, he's a mathematician at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. I mean, this is a serious academic.
A highly respected academic. His field is group theory, a very abstract and complex area of mathematics. Rips, along with his colleagues Dron Witztum and Alexander Rotenberg, were the ones who finally automated the ELS process.
And this led to their paper in 1994.
In 1994, they published a paper in Statistical Science. Now, for our listeners, we need to be clear. Statistical Science is not a tabloid. It's not a religious journal. It is a top-tier, rigorously peer-reviewed academic journal. They don't publish mysticism, they publish math.
And this paper was about the Great Rabbi's experiment. We need to really break this down because it feels like the foundation for all the other claims. What exactly did they do?
Okay, so they wanted a way to test if this clustering effect was real or just a fluke. They needed a data set that couldn't be fudged or manipulated.
Right, something objective.
So they took the names of famous rabbis who lived centuries after the Torah was written, specifically a list of 34 sages from the Middle Ages and later.
So names that absolutely should not be in the Bible. There's no way the original authors could have known them.
No way. They took these names, and then they took the dates of their birth and death. Then they fired up the algorithm. They asked a simple question. Do the names of these rabbis appear in the Torah text via ELS? Not only did their names appear, but they appeared in statistically significant proximity to their correct dates of birth and death in the grid.
So the name of a rabbi would show up, and crossing it, or right next to it, would be his date of death.
Exactly. And not just dates, but also the cities they were associated with.
But how do we know that isn't just chance? I mean, maybe the word for, say, Jerusalem appears 1,000 times in the text.
That's the question the peer reviewers asked. That's what makes the study so powerful. They calculated the probability value, the p-value. In that first published study, the odds of those specific matches happening by pure chance were calculated at 1 in 62,500.
1 in 62,000. That's significant.
Very significant. And later experiments with expanded lists pushed those odds to, in some cases, 1 in over 1,000,000.
And this is where Harold Gans comes into the story. The sources make a big deal about him, and it seems like for good reason. He wasn't a believer. He was NSA.
Yeah, you can't get much more skeptical than this. Harold Gans was a senior cryptologic mathematician for the National Security Agency. His entire life was making and breaking codes for the U.S. government.
So he reads the Rips paper.
And he's totally unconvinced. He reportedly thought it had to be a fluke, or maybe the data was massaged somehow. So he decided to run his own experiment specifically to debunk it.
The ultimate stress test. What did he do that was different?
He designed a new, even more rigorous experiment. He took a different list of famous rabbis, and instead of their dates, he looked for the cities of their birth and death. But here's the brilliant part. He ran a control.
Okay.
For each rabbi, he had the correct city, but he also had a list of dummy cities, other places from the same time period. He tested them all.
So the logic is, if it's all just random noise, the dummy cities should match just as often as the real ones.
Exactly. If the code was fake, there'd be no statistical difference between the real city and a random one. But that's not what he found. Gans discovered that the real cities consistently clustered near the rabbis' names, and the false ones did not. He replicated the results. He had to conclude that the phenomenon was real.
That's a huge moment. An NSA codebreaker tries to disprove the theory and ends up validating it. It's like something out of a movie.
He famously stated that the data was statistically significant and that the clustering phenomenon was real and not by chance. It was a turning point.
But what about the counter-argument? The Moby Dick challenge. I've heard people say, well, an Australian mathematician, Brenda McKay, found assassinations encoded in Moby Dick.
The sources address this head-on, and it's a critical distinction. They argue that, yes, if you look hard enough in a long enough text, you can find phrases. McKay found things like, Indira Gandhi will be killed.
Which sounds pretty compelling.
It does, until you look at the details. The sources argue that what you don't find in Moby Dick are the dense matrices of related data. You don't find the date, the weapon, the location of the assassination, and the name of the assassin all clustered together in a tight grid against massive odds. The Torah code, they argue, is unique in its density of information.
And that density brings us to the predictive side of things. I mean, finding dead rabbis is impressive, but it's still history. The sources claim this code can predict the future, or at least events that were in the future when the text was written.
Right. And the most famous headline example, the one that really brought this to public attention, is Yitzhak Rabin.
The Israeli prime minister, assassinated in 1995.
Yes. According to the sources, Michael Drosnin, an investigative journalist, was working with the code researchers. He claims that a year before the assassination, they found the name Yitzhak Rabin in the code.
And what was next to it?
Crossing his name was the chilling phrase, assassin that will assassinate.
And this was found a year before it happened.
That is the claim. Drosnin says he even flew to Israel to warn Rabin's people, but he was dismissed.
Wow. If that's true, I mean, that moves the needle. It's one thing to find a pattern after the fact. We're all good at hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
But to say, here is a name and here is a threat before it happens, that's totally different.
It's a different category of evidence, and it's not just political events. The sources list all sorts of things. The Shoemaker-Levy comet colliding with Jupiter was apparently in there with the date it would hit.
Right.
But there's one example in the source stack that is particularly detailed and, well, frankly, pretty spooky. They call it the frozen chastisement.
I wanted to dig into this one. It sounds like a bad disaster movie title, but the specifics are just weirdly precise.
The research, and this specifically cites work done by Cardinal Richard Ruff and his team, focused on a matrix they found containing the terms glacial or frozen chastisement.
And it gave a specific date.
It did. The grid highlighted the date, December 13th, 2013. This was published months before that date arrived.
Okay, December 13th, 2013. I remember that winter being pretty bad in the U.S. The term polar vortex was everywhere.
It was. But the code wasn't just predicting a cold winter. The matrix pointed to a global anomalous event. On that exact date, December 13th, 2013, a historic winter storm slammed into the Middle East.
The Middle East.
Yes. We're talking about snow in Cairo for the first time in something like 100 years.
Snow in Cairo. That doesn't happen.
It's incredibly rare. Jerusalem was paralyzed by 3 feet of snow. Syria was blanketed. It was a massive, historic, and completely unseasonal weather event. And the argument here is that the code predicted not just a generic bad weather event, but a specific type of event frozen on a specific date, months before any weather model could have possibly seen it coming.
That's unsettling. It's one thing to predict a human action like an assassination, but predicting the weather, a chaotic system, on a specific day.
It suggests a different level of knowledge about the structure of reality itself.
And this leads us to the biggest and frankly the most controversial part of all the source material we have. We've talked about rabbis, we've talked about comets, we've talked about weather, but the bulk of the documents we have are focused on one single question.
The identity of the Messiah.
Yeah. This is the core of the research presented by Cardinal Ruff and the groups he was associated with. They took the ELS method and applied it to the ultimate theological question.
And they didn't just look for the word Messiah. That would be too simple.
Right. They searched for the specific phrase, he is the Messiah. In Hebrew, that's Hu HaMashiach.
And we really need to be clear for everyone listening. We are reporting what the source material claims. These are the findings they present.
Absolutely. So they plug in, he is the Messiah. What does the grid show them?
This is where that matrix concept becomes absolutely vital. They found the phrase. It was there. But the ELS sequence, the skip code, it didn't stop at those words. According to the source, the phrase mathematically extends into a 12-letter sequence.
And that full sequence reads?
It reads, Ar-Lir, he is the Messiah, in Hebrew. Ar-Lir hu HaMashiach.
Ar-Lir, that's a name, a very specific name.
It is, and that's not all. Right next to it, interacting with that term in the grid, they found a secondary 16-letter sequence.
What did that one say?
And there was God, and there was one Re'el, Vayehi Ha'el, Vayehi Aleph Ra'el.
Ra'el. Okay, so let's unpack the linguistics here. Ra'el or Ra'el. The sources treat this as a proper name.
They do. They connect Ra'el directly to the name Raymond Elwood Lear. The argument presented is that Ra'el is the encoded divine version of this modern name.
And they claim there's math to back this.
Things like Lord God, Coder Elohim Truth, and Father Our Lear Son. supposedly have corresponding values.
That feels a bit esoteric for some listeners, maybe.
It can be, but what is perhaps more striking to the casual observer are the biographical details they claim to have found.
This is what really stood out to me. Usually prophecies are vague, right? A leader will rise from the west, that sort of thing. But the sources claim the code knew this man's medical chart from birth.
It's incredibly granular. The code apparently contains the phrase from her toxemia Lear.
Toxemia, that's a pregnancy complication, right? Preeclampsia.
Hmm.
It can be very dangerous.
Correct. And the source claims that this individual, Raymond Elwood Lear, was born prematurely, precisely because his mother developed toxemia during the pregnancy.
Okay, but why on earth would that be in the Bible? Why would a 3,000-year-old code care about a specific medical diagnosis?
The source material provides a very specific theological answer for that. It claims the preterm birth wasn't an accident. It was necessary to align with a specific celestial window. They call it the Tetrad to Pentecost conception.
Let's break that down. Tetrad, that refers to the so-called blood moons.
Yes, a tetrad is a series of 4 consecutive total lunar eclipses, which is a rare astronomical event. The argument is that the timing of this person's conception and birth had to align perfectly with the interval between a specific lunar tetrad and the Jewish feast of Pentecost. The toxemia was the biological mechanism that forced the birth to happen at the exact moment required by this celestial clock.
So the argument is the illness wasn't random, it was a mechanism, a trigger. And the code recorded that specific trigger, toxemia, 3,000 years ago.
That is the assertion. And the probability of the name Lear appearing right next to the medical term toxemia in a random grid is, according to their calculations, astronomically low.
And then there's the geography. The sources talk about a return event. They give a date in 2011.
They do. January 28th, 2011. The source material cites a code sequence that reads, "Westwards the plenary Raymond mi re ya threatener thus to signal."
Westwards. That seems significant.
The interpretation provided links this directly to a verse in the New Testament, Matthew 24.27. "For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be."
East to west, like lightning.
The claim is that on January 28, 2011, a significant event symbolizing this coming occurred involving this figure.
And they tie this to the eagle symbolism. This part fascinated me because it mixes modern geography with ancient symbolism.
It does. The source claims that Raymond Elwood Lear was moved on that date to the international zone between El Paso, Texas, and Ciudad Juarez, Mexico.
Right on the border.
Exactly. Now, you have to think about the national symbols. What's the national bird, the symbol of the United States?
The bald eagle?
And of Mexico.
It's a golden eagle on their flag, devouring a snake.
Right, so you have a very specific geographic region defined by the meeting of 2 eagles. The source connects this directly to the very next verse in Matthew chapter 24, verse 28. "Wherever the body will be, there will the eagles be gathered."
So just to recap the claim here,
Mhm.
the argument is you have the name R. Lear connected to Messiah. You have the specific medical history, toxemia. You have the east to west movement. And you have the location where the eagles are gathered. And all of this is supposedly sitting in a grid of letters that has been frozen since the time of Moses.
That is the complete picture the sources paint, and they emphasize again and again that dictionary problem. If you do not have the name Lear or Rail in your search dictionary, you will never ever see it. It's hiding in plain sight.
Which brings me back to the big question I keep having. Why? Why do it this way? If God or whoever wrote this code wanted to send a message, why make it so difficult? Why not just, I don't know, write it in the sky?
This brings us to the theological context, or the why of it all. The sources argue that we live in a unique age, an age of deep skepticism and science. A burning bush might not convince a modern physicist. A voice from the clouds might be dismissed as an auditory hallucination. But data.
Data is the language of our time.
It's the language of our time. Repeatable, verifiable, statistical data. The source material argues that the code is hard data that no mathematician can honestly deny. It is a proof designed specifically for a generation that trusts computers more than it trusts prophets.
A message tailored for its audience.
Exactly. And they argue it's not just a Jewish or Christian thing either. The sources bring the Quran into this, which I found really surprising. It's explicitly presented as an interfaith revelation. The sources cite Surah 6, verse 154 of the Quran.
I have that quote right here. It says, To Moses, we gave the scriptures, a complete code for the righteous as an explanation of all things.
They focus heavily on that specific translation of that word as code. The argument they make is that the Quran itself confirms that the Torah contains this hidden layer, and it commands believers to heed it. It suggests that the unsealing of this book is a global event meant for all Abrahamic faiths.
It goes right back to that Daniel prophecy again. The wise will understand, but the wicked will not. The source seems to be saying that understanding now means having the capacity to accept this digital revelation.
And they also quote from the book of Proverbs 25.2, "It is the glory of God to conceal a thing, but the glory of kings is to search out a matter."
The search is the point.
The concealment was intentional. The discovery is the test. The sources contend that these are provable messages from God that are specifically designed to bypass all the fakery and noise and confusion of the modern world.
So if we zoom out from all this for a second, what are we really looking at here? What is the ultimate claim?
At its core, we are looking at a claim that information can traverse time. We are looking at a stack of evidence from the peer-reviewed Great Rabbis experiment to the specificity of the Rael matrices that suggests the authors of these ancient texts had access to names, dates, and events that wouldn't happen for millennia.
It really is the ultimate message in a bottle, but the bottle is a computer program, and the ocean is 3,000 years of human history.
And the intended reader is us right now.
We've covered a huge amount of ground today. I mean, we've gone from the mechanics of the Masoretic text preservation to NSA algorithms, from polar vortexes in Cairo to the U.S.-Mexico border. It's a lot to process.
It certainly challenges the way we view text, and maybe even the way we view time and information. It suggests that a book might not just be a book, it might be a program waiting to be run.
I love that idea, a program waiting to be run. And that brings us to the end of this deep dive. But before we go, I want to leave you with a thought that really stuck with me from all this.
Okay.
We talked about the dictionary problem, the Scrabble analogy. You can't find the word selfie if your dictionary is from 1990. You can't find Rael in the code if you don't input the name.
Right. It raises a pretty provocative question.
It really does. If the code requires a user-defined dictionary to find a name, what other massive world-changing words or names are currently sitting in that grid right now, completely invisible to us?
Yeah.
What are we missing simply because we don't know the word for it yet?
That is a question that could keep you up at night.
Thanks for listening.